I'm Jeanette Keynes from Jewelry Arts Inc. In this video, I'm going to show you how to bezel set a gorgeous square faceted tourmaline. So, look at this gorgeous tourmaline. If that's not just like delicious, I don't know what is. So yesterday we made our inner bezel and we soldered it shut. We made it out of 26 gauge fine silver. We made it beautiful and level. And we put some, I think Mylar we used on this, but you always want to use something shiny in the bottom of a closed setting so it reflects the light through the stone. It makes it delicious, which is what we want. And essentially we fooled around with it until we have the height just right. What you're looking for when you're setting a faceted stone is you're looking for that bezel being just above the girdle. You are going to think that it is not enough. It is. You want just a little, because what happens with a faceted stone is if the girdle is down in there a little bit low, like, will you be able to set it? Yes, of course you will. But by the time you're done, you're going to end up covering a little bit too much of your nice stone. You know what I mean? And the whole goal of this is to hold it, but to really show it off. Like a cabochon, I feel like a lot of times, you know, if you have a little more metal showing, like it's all good, but with a faceted stone, it kind of spreads across the top and you really don't want that. So I will let Alexis get one beautiful close-up of that from the side. And basically, in order to make sure it's in there and fitting really nicely, I'm always using a dowel. A dowel won't damage your stone. Because if you're sitting there like just taking your finger and like, you know, like who knows what's going on. You need something flat that you can really press so that it's, you know that it's in there, you know that it's level. Because if you made a tight bezel in the first place, which you should, you also have to make sure that it's actually going all the way down in there. Because sometimes people are afraid to push on it, which I understand, but that's why you use something wood so that you won't mess it up. But if it isn't in there all the way, you start setting and then at some point it's gonna shift. And then, you know, you have to unset it, etc. And that's hopefully a whole different day and a whole different video. Nobody ever wants to unset, but we all sooner or later have to, but we won't, not today. So this is exactly at the right height. Everything is good to go. You notice I mummified the whole setting, covered it up with tape, because it is impossible to not slip occasionally. We do the best we can not to slip, but sooner or later we all do. And there's nothing worse than having that pristine piece that you're like, I've just set it and you get that one ding on top. And like, does it really matter? No, but it just makes you feel like super bummed. So we're gonna use the bezel roller from my beautiful master setting tool set. I always get my plug voice on, you know, it's very dramatic. So when you're using a setting tool, even if you're insane and you don't want to get my set, let's just say you're just crazy that way, make sure you take your tools and you measure them to your hand, because tools are meant to fit in the palm of your hand with your thumb and your forefinger on either side. Like this is the slightly larger set, which actually for me is just a hair long, but it's fine. Do you know what I'm saying? If your tool is sticking out here, it's crazy too long, you wanna chop it off. Of course, I recommend mine, but you know, if you're gonna be that way, make sure to fit it to your hand. I mean, that's what I used to always do when I would do my setting workshops. Is one of the things that we would do in the class is like, let's take your tools and we would chop off like a lot so that if it's in the palm of your hand, thumb and your forefinger should be able to rest on either side just like that, okay? So this is pressed in, the height's right, like we're ready to set. Now I'm relatively short, so I normally stand up when I set. If I was much taller, I probably could sit here and get the right angle, but I cannot. Because here's the thing, you want the tool to be at a 45-degree angle, like this. And you can only get that 45-degree angle if your elbow is up in the air. It's the same thing as when we're like fusing and stuff like that. It's like, nobody wants to like be rude and do this, but this is what you have to do. You gotta get your elbow up, okay? Because if your angle is too low, and you're like this is super common. Basically the path of least resistance, you're just gonna eject your stone. And who hasn't had that happen to them? Shit. I mean, of course, also with my left hand, I'm also gonna have a thumb or a forefinger holding onto the stone while it's still loose. But that's why you don't want to have this low angle. It just kind of like shoots out, which really sucks. Now, another thing that we have to consider is we have corners here. Anytime you have a bezel with any kind of point or corner, you have to do that first. because you're going to be constantly moving any extra bezel. It's like, I think of it as like sweeping. You're like sweeping, sweeping, getting the extra away from those points. If you save the points to the end, you will end up with extra space in there. It will be extremely impossible to get out, and your setting will never look really all that great. Okay, so you always go with the hardest part first.
So that stone had one corner that differed from the other three. Would you start with that one?
Yes, these are not super sharp corners. But even so, even if it was just like with an oval, it doesn't have sharp points, but I would still always start on the skinnier end. Okay? Now, can I see which was the sharper point of them all? I think it's that right there. Okay, so I'm gonna put my finger on the stone, and I'm gonna rest this right here. And you notice my thumb is resting on here, because anytime you're completely up in the air, you know, it's much easier to slip. So I like to brace my thumb right here. Okay, so then I can press in, and I can just go back and forth a little tiny bit. When you're setting, everything is from your shoulder. You're just using your body weight to lean in a little bit. If you find yourself like doing this, don't do that. It's not very effective. It's not good for your hand, and you do tend to slip more. So what I do is I get myself in position, and then I just lean in a little bit. And even if you're like 95 pounds soaking wet, you have plenty of force to do that. Do you know what I'm saying? Because people are like, oh, I don't have the strength, and that's because you're not using your leverage. Okay? So I press in, I'm gonna press like this and away. Because you see how I'm sweeping the extra space away from that point. I mean, it's not done yet by any means. And Alexis, can you get a little, you see it? You got it. Yeah. Okay?
And you're still gonna do cardinal point?
I'm gonna work once I'm done with this point, I'll do the one across from it. Because basically, I don't really leave this corner until all the space is gone. It may not be like 1000% done, but because the whole time I'm working this, I'm always gonna be moving the space away from the points and toward, you know, these broader areas in here. Because you don't want to like halfway through start pressing toward the points, because again, then you're just pushing the extra space there. Okay, so just stick your noses in there just a little bit and take a look. Like I said, maybe that's not 1000% done, but you notice how now the bezel there is the shape of the stone, and I don't really have any extra space there. I'll do a little bit more. Because essentially, the actual act of setting the stone is like you push on it, you know what I mean? But it's like how you choose where to go first and what direction to go in is what makes all the difference. Okay, so I'm gonna go now across to the other side, press the stone. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you too, a big part of this being well behaved is making a nice tight bezel in the first place. This is one of those things where it's like, you know, you wanna pay attention early. You know, a lot of times people only start paying attention to things at the end, and by then you've already made all the decisions that will make your life really hard and difficult. Do you know what I'm saying? So you want to be like, you know, spend extra time getting your bezel to fit really well, and setting is going to be like no problem at all.
Yeah, setting it up.
Yes.
So like the whole project you were working towards easy setting.
Exactly. Because if your setting doesn't look good, you could work 600 hours on this piece. You're not going to be happy with it. You know what I mean? And again, that isn't about perfect, but if your setting doesn't look good, the piece doesn't look good, you're not going to be happy, you know. And so for me, it's always about choosing like what to fuss about, and those beginning stages are the best thing. It's like in jewelry, you always pay up front. It's cheapest to pay up front. At the end, it's like you're just like trying to make it work, and it's like
nightmare.
Yes, exactly. And I learned that from doing exactly that, being like, oh, well, I want to get to the end. I want to get to like the good part. I want to get to the setting, or I want to get to whatever. And then realizing like all the little things I rushed through along the way had created a world of fuckery for myself, basically. Okay, so I'm going to keep working my way around. I'm going to hand it over to you and let you work on it. I want you to just work on each of the corners the same way. You press in. You press in, I'm pushing the metal away from the corners, okay?
Okay.
And then when you feel like all the space is gone and everything is looking really good, send up a flare I'll come over and we'll take a look. But you see what I'm saying? See how it starts to really like take
Yeah.
form?
Yeah, it's nice.
Okay. So if you look at this now, it's pretty much done. And I want you guys to come over and take a look. It looks lovely and smooth, but like there's still some tiny little gaps between the bezel and the top of the stone. So it looks exactly as it should at this stage. Take a look and see how beauteous. So what I normally do, in order to close those tiny little spaces, you really need to get the angle of your tool much higher up. Now, if I was about 8 feet tall, I could just do that with my elbow. I am not, and I cannot. So what I do is a two-handed technique where I'm gonna hold my tool in my left hand, and I'm gonna use a leather mallet just to tap so that I can work at that high angle and get a little force. This is not a scenario of, you know what I mean? This is gonna be little light, okay? So what I do is, I'm right-handed, so in my left hand I hold the tool. And what I do is this. Basically, it's resting against my 4 fingers. My thumb is right in front. And the tool is resting sort of in the middle, right up against my pinky like that, okay? Now the advantage of this hand position is that basically when I move the tool, all I'm ever doing is this. I'm just rocking on my pinky. I'm not trying to be a piano player and like, you know what I mean, operate all my fingers separately, which can be a lot to handle at once, okay? Because if you hold it this way, you can just forget about your left hand, so to speak. Because what I'm gonna do is I rest my pinky on the surface here. I rest the top of the tool of my bezel roller there, right on the top of the bezel, just like that. And you notice that's all I do is roll the tool back and forth a little bit just like this. So then I get in position like so. And you notice from the sound, this is not a super violent action. This is just providing what my shoulder would be doing, okay?
And that one you don't do the corners first, or it doesn't really matter?
I'm still working from the corners outward. I mean, there's really not like particular space left to move around, but still I generally work from the corners outward. See that? Like that.
It's a little bit like you're holding like a chasing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you see what happens, it just closes those little spots, it smooths out the top. You know, if there was any little wiggle left, which there isn't in this one, but it'll close it up. It kind of just finishes it up. Because what you're not trying to do, you're not trying to take your bezel and like drive it down the stone. You're just smoothing and closing those little tiny spaces. And yeah, it is pretty much how you might hold a chasing tool. I do it all pretty much the same way. Okay, so I want you to give it a try, just go all the way around. But if you take a look even just from doing that, you see the difference?
Yeah. Yeah, it's starting to.
It kind of closes off all those little gaps. Okay, see what I mean? Take a look.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so I would say do a circuit all the way around and then we'll check in.
Okay.
I just want to show off how beautiful and smooth that looks.
Yeah, I love how tight that is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite irregular.
Well, that's why we make everything custom. You know, everything is custom to the stone, but that looks gorgeous. So the only thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to use a Swifty wheel. I'll show you guys how to use that, and that's just for like the final little spiff on the top. So, conveniently enough, there it is. Look how gorgeous that looks. That's why I keep my nails polished for just such scenarios. If that doesn't look amazing, I don't know what does. So normally with a setting like this, if you do this, you know, the way that I showed you, it's very clean and tidy and gorgeous. The only thing I usually do is I use a polishing wheel at the very top of the bezel just to smooth it and shine it a little bit. You can't just use any polishing wheel to polish around a stone because many of them will scratch your stones depending on what your stone is, and you don't want that. So like, that's why I made the bezel polishing kit, because every wheel in here is totally safe for all stones. That's why I made it like separate. Do you know what I mean? So that, because that's usually what people do. They're like, wait, what is this wheel? What is that wheel? So the grape pumice will smooth it out, but it makes it slightly less shiny. Where the Swifty wheels, the little more like blue-greeny ones, they give you like a high shine. And mainly I just use these, but I also have the little knife edge wheels in here for, like, let's say you have a bunch of little tiny bezels very close together. Sometimes you need to, you know, get down in between. But when I've got plenty of room, I'm just gonna use one like this. So I'm sure you guys all know this, but I'm gonna tell you anyway. When you're using a flex shaft, it's extremely important that you're supported. You should never be working like this, like up in the air, because that's how things, you know, go flying. So you always wanna rest your forearms on the table, okay? Now I'm right-handed, so I hold the flex shaft like this, with my 4 fingers holding it like this, with my thumb sticking out, because then my thumb can either go on my other finger or on the piece itself. If you do that, you're really, really supported. Okay. You see what I mean? Is that sexy? When I polish, you want to think about it like you're peeling a carrot. If you want your carrot smooth, you can't take your tool and go boink, 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 because you're just going to get little dots. You want to pick an area and just stroke it. And then stroke it, do you know what I mean? From the top to the bottom of that area. Now, because I'm right-handed, right over here is the easiest place for me to work, you know, at like 3 o'clock-ish on the clock. So when I need to go to the other area, I'm not gonna reach over and work like this. I'm gonna just keep turning this around so that I'm always working in the area that's easy for me to both see and control. Because sometimes you get carried away, you know, and you're like doing, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, what am I doing? You know, you're all contorted. You always want to think about yourself first. Am I comfortable? Are my arms comfortable? Is my hand comfortable? If you aren't comfortable, I guarantee you're not concentrating on what you're doing. Okay? So I'm gonna go just do a circuit all the way around. It's a few strokes in each area. It doesn't require very much at all.
So are all of those wheels pumice based and that's why they're safe for all stones? Or is pumice okay for all stones? Or
It depends what wheel you're talking about. That's what I'm saying.
It's
like the gray pumice like this. Yes, this is safe for using against settings. But you can't necessarily just say a pumice wheel because they have different size grit. Like
the wheels are overwhelming.
Yes, they are. And there's no description of anything. Like, what does fine mean? What does medium mean? Who the fuck knows? Every company has a different idea.
And different colors, everything.
Different colors. That's why for me, I have a couple kits. They're like, these are my favorites that I use all the time and they work great. That doesn't mean like those are the best wheels in the world, they're the only wheels you can use. But I know exactly how those are gonna work. You know what I mean? Because you can get a white wheel from one place and a white wheel from another place, and they may be totally different. So I like to sort of.
Those were all pumice based. That's what I was asking.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter if you hit your stone. Do you know what I mean? And that's the important thing, because we all think we can be super careful, and then sooner or later you're like, oops. You know what I mean? So
it's
you know,
not scratching the stone anymore.
it will not scratch your stone.
Stories.
Horrible stories. And that's why I eventually like found these and was just like, no, because like I said, we all think that won't happen to us. It's just this once, it'll be fine. That's the devil talking. Do not listen when that voice in your head is like, oh, it'll be fine. This is just, I have this wheel and I'm just gonna use it. Yeah, it's like quickly. Just quick. That's the devil. I mean, it takes, you know, a minute or two. You see what I mean? It's just like, it's so beautiful and gorgeous. Okay? So like, Gina, if you want to go around and do like another round just around the top so you can feel it and whatever, but it really doesn't need very much more at all. Okay?